Live from the studio at the Northwest Florida School of Biblical Studies, this is Have a Bible Question, where you are part of the program. Now, let's go to the Bible for answers to your Bible questions.
A lot of people are wondering about the economy, the government, the politics, and everything that's taking place. And I want to kind of talk about, so what is a Christian response to what's taking place? But this plays right with it. But before we get there, I actually got an audio clip that I have prepared, and I want you to...
One of the things I do want to bring...
one of the things, what I want to do is preface this. This is Ronnie Whittemore, great gospel preacher, perhaps high on my list of favorite gospel preachers to listen to. And he did not disappoint me last Thursday night. I mean, he preached a sermon that was just phenomenal. Anyway, this is from our 2012 lectureship, which would have been the second term election that Obama was elected.
Okay.
And this is what he had to say then. And I want to just listen to this. It's not very long.
Up before we begin the lesson is that this is a very important election year, I believe, for our country. But while there are topics that I, as a citizen, am especially interested in, as I am every political season, I think that it's also a very important time in regards to our morality in our nation. There seems to be a great and overwhelming emphasis upon that. And I believe that we need to consider our votes very carefully and use them wisely so that we might be able to stem the tide of some of the things that are not just creeping our way, but just sweeping our way. But having said that, I think there's also a word of caution that we as Christians, and I use the word Christian in the very specific sense, that we as Christians not get distracted from sometimes things we can't do anything about. Because frankly, no matter who gets elected or who is in Congress or who is in Senate, they are not by no means true Christians or righteous men and women. And so sometimes we end up holding our nose and we end up voting for the lesser of two evils. But the work of the church and the work of the Lord goes on. And it is separate and apart from our government. It doesn't really matter what country we live in, what nation we are in, if we're in a true republic, if we're in a democracy, if we're in communism, if we're in a socialist, it doesn't really matter because the work of the church continues and it has to be done under whatever government we are in. So I don't want us to get distracted sometimes by things that are going on around us of which we have very little control and we forget to do the work of the church. If ever there were a time for God's people to be busy saving souls, it's today. And so I wanted to say that before we actually began the lesson.
Now, that was from a 2012 lectureship here at the school. By the way, we will make that lesson that he preaches after that available because he preached a fantastic sermon on Elisha and the she-bears. But, you know, I downloaded the lesson the other day from our archive because that sermon he went on to preach is actually among my favorite sermons that I've ever heard. And I kind of forgot that he made those comments at the beginning. And so whenever I heard him, I was like, well, that's perfect because isn't that still fitting today?
Oh, it's interesting that that many years ago, and yet it sounds as if he were saying that just recently.